Sarah Bareilles, brave, right? Like just say what you want to say, and having someone like Helen as a storyteller to help you with that and to be brave, right? I want to see you. We all want to see you be brave. So welcome, Helen. All right. So this is day 3 of Sing Your Heart Song Summit. It is such an honor to introduce you to our next speaker today, and that is Helen Snell. Helen Snell is a storyteller. She provides content that connects your story with your client's story, talking about alignment, to create clear marketing strategies that develop relationships and close sales, be profitable. Adding key personal elements to your business through storytelling lets people know who you are, not just what you do. Helen focuses on storytelling in developing biographies, profiles, web content, blogs, and marketing materials. She also teaches story workshops and provides ghostwriting for blogs and books. Her passion project, though, is telling stories for the planet, our Mother Earth. She's currently working on moving her family to a sustainable property with a future focus on a plant-based B&B with a senior dog sanctuary somewhere on the water. So with that, Helen, welcome to our Sing Your Heart Song Summit. Take it away.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to say that my love of animals may interrupt our presentation today. I've got 2 dogs in the house who just barked at somebody on the at the door. So hopefully they're going to be quiet for the next little while. So I'm not going to be able to razzle and dazzle you with a demo like Petra did, but I hope that I'm going to show you some steps that you can take to really help move your story, to sell your story. And that can be confusing for people because it doesn't actually mean that you're in sales. You don't have to be making a sales pitch, but we have to sell all the time. We have to sell our kids to clean their teeth. We have to, sell our story to the police officer when we don't want to get a ticket for getting pulled over. We're selling all the time. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit more about, we can see that all good? Awesome. So I'm going to talk about you and me and the stories that connect us. There is such value in knowing your story. We've had speakers over the last couple of days talking about, discovering your story and finding your voice and the value of writing a book. I want to add a little twist to that. Sorry about my dogs. I want to add that your story is ever changing. So, don't be afraid to write that book or develop the story that's resonating with you right now. But like an emotion, like Petra was talking about, or like a choice that you make, they are a moment in time. And your stories are the same, and they can and definitely will change. So my heart song took several years and several iterations of myself to take flight. I resonated so much with Petra sharing about being an ugly duckling and a tomboy as a kid. That was totally me. I also didn't have that passion for that one thing in school. I remember I celebrated success in several different careers. And then I actually became an entrepreneur out of necessity. I wasn't born with the idea of building an empire. I didn't even have a lemonade stand as a kid. But my story changed, and so my career changed, and my life changed as well. So I found myself separated with 3 children. I was working a part-time admin job that worked around their school schedule. My youngest daughter, that you see pictured there with the viewer at the top of the screen, she has special needs. So whether it was daycare or life beyond school, I knew that I needed a different approach for her care. I didn't have more time, so I ventured into a home-based business. Suddenly, I was one of thousands of people trying to get your attention with that same bottle of product. And so my story became about the small steps that I was taking to gain back my health and to make a difference to the health of the planet. And then all of a sudden I was talking from that place in my heart. I wasn't selling a product. I was actually sharing a dream or a challenge or sharing my story. And others were buying it. They were connecting with that same journey that I was on. And that story actually grew into a blog, and then webinars, and then several speaking opportunities, and eventually into a shift in my business where I now, as Olivia mentioned, help others find their story and use storytelling in business to connect naturally to their marketing and to their audience. So I run workshops to teach you how to do this if you're a do-it-yourselfer, but I also write, pardon me, copy for entrepreneurs as well. So that looks like ghostwriting blogs and books. I produce web content and story biographies. And because I love stories so much, I also love to write legacy stories for seniors. These are beautiful ways to capture the stories of our beloved family in their own words. So I'm a writer. I'm a single mother. I love nature. I seek harmony and justice. I love animals, especially sea creatures. But these don't define me. They're actually all a part of me, and they all can be individual stories in the right instance. So whether you're an entrepreneur, business owner, an employee, a parent, a child, a spouse, story affects all that you do. It's the lens of how you view the world. So when you share your story or an idea or a greeting, people receive that through their lens of the world. I recall when I used to go on walks with my young daughter, Tori. She has Down syndrome, and she saw the world so differently than I did. First of all, she was closer to the ground, but more importantly, she simply viewed the world with a very different lens than most people. And it has actually been a joy to watch her grow up and learn from her. But she would question things that I took for granted. She would see things that I didn't see. I used to tell my friends that I would go for walks and have my Tori vision on. Her world is actually quite black and white from a teaching aspect, but inside her mind is this delightful kaleidoscope of color. So my story can be similar to yours or have no connection. You know how when you meet someone and you just feel like you've known them forever? Or you can't get more than a one-word answer from someone? It's like that. So let's translate all of this into making your business story connect powerfully with your audience. So first, let's talk about that audience. I love this picture. So I want you to think, though, for a minute. I want you to close your eyes and picture your client in your mind. Is it some stylish woman enjoying a cup of tea or a martini on a terrace in Manhattan? Is it a businessman in a three-piece suit who enjoys fishing on the weekends? Is it some frazzled stay-at-home mom in the suburbs? This graphic is such a great illustration of knowing your audience. I always need to share it. Both of these men share the same stats. Is there anyone who doesn't recognize these figures? Call out or put your hand up. I'll explain who they are if you don't know. We're all good. So here we see they're born in the same year. They grew up in England. I think that stat about children is incorrect. I think Ozzy Osbourne has more than 2 children. But they're both entrepreneurs, and then they're in the upper 1% wealth segment in Britain. But they couldn't be more different as people. So you need to add as much detail as possible when you're thinking about your audience. And again, whether this is your book that you're writing or a story that you're telling someone, a presentation, or if you're selling something, you really need to know your audience best. So think about their family, their interests, where they live, where they play, who they hang around with. And then this helps with the next part. And that is, think of what you can do for them. So list it all. I can. What can you do to help that person that you're picturing in your mind as your ideal audience? I'm going to talk about this example a couple of times throughout the presentation today as a mechanic. So a mechanic can fix your car. They can teach you about maintenance for your car. They can store your snow tires for you. They can provide a waiting room for your kids. They can find aftermarket parts for you. They can relieve your stress. So these are all things that a mechanic could actually talk about in stories. Can you think of any other services that a mechanic could provide? there's always unique ways we can think of opportunities. So, maybe there's a mechanic in your neighborhood who has a chop shop and can get you illegal parts. Maybe there's an audience for that. Who knows? So stories can help share all of these solutions with your audience. So story is the easiest way to make a lasting point. I can show you a picture of something, I can demonstrate it, or I can tell you a story of how it made a difference in someone's life. And that's what will stick. So we see a picture here of a snow tire. You put it on your car to provide better traction on winter roads. I'm in Canada, this is a real thing. Or you can see on the right picture of a police car. You can explain how having snow tires on your car avoided a multiple car pileup because your tires were able to grip the icy roads and steer you clear. That's the story that's going to stick in your mind, not how to put them on your car or not a picture of what they look like. So stories establish connection points on your values and your client's values. They can highlight your expertise. They bring about the person who is behind the business. Think about how many auto mechanics are in your neighborhood. Why do you choose the one that you choose? They're a tool to develop relationships, and stories really make you memorable. There's one other thing stories do, and that is that they calm the primitive brain. So, we just had some talk in the last presentation about energy. So when we meet someone, when we're presented with a new idea, or when we're being sold to, our brain immediately goes into protection mode. So we put up this wall that says, this is different, this is scary, and our amygdala kicks in and it takes over to protect us, even when things aren't scary. This happens. So what happens with stories is they diffuse that amygdala response and they calm the brain with information that they can relate to. So does anybody here want to volunteer if they feel like when they make a purchase, do they buy based on facts and data? Is anybody here willing to share? Steve, you're shaking your head no.
So my understanding is, and probably my experience is that we buy emotionally and then we justify it logically.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you just hit the nail on the head. When we can control that emotion, we can control the buying response. So if you are following along in the handout guide, just know that I'm going to go off book a little bit here. I'm not going to go in order. A bit of a plot twist always helps to keep the story interesting. So we're going to just go off book a little bit. So since story is the easiest way to communicate a message, I want to have a little bit of fun. And I want to demonstrate with a well-known children's story, The Three Little Pigs. So this is actually a picture of the book that I had as a child. Probably dating myself a little bit, but I had a whole collection of Walt Disney Golden books, they're called. They had this beautiful golden seam down the outside. And I had a whole series of these and I read them over and over and over. I saved them for my kids and they never wanted them. I was heartbroken that they didn't want them. So I still love Walt Disney and I still love a good story. So based on this story, I'm actually going to give the characters in the story some personality traits. And I'm going to maybe modernize it a wee bit, but then we're going to use that as a teaching tool. So we have the first pig who built his house of straw. He was in a hurry so he could go party. The second pig who built his house of sticks was in touch with nature and simplicity. The third pig who built his house of bricks was responsible. He was a self-taught man, or self-taught pig, I guess I should say. And then of course we can't forget the wolf. So the wolf, he lived a life with the same approach, the same kind of predictability, the same system over and over and over again. If you remember from the story, I'm going to huff and puff, and he did that many times. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share one of my stories over coffee with a pig. And part of my story is about cheering for the underdog. I'm an advocate for our failing ecosystem on the planet. I'm an advocate for special needs. I'm even an advocate for the first blooming entrepreneur. Anybody who's got a hard story, I'm a softie for that. So how could I impact the 4 characters from this particular story with my same story and impact them the same way? So let's focus on one particular story from my underdog spirit. I have this dream as a writer to highlight the stories of special needs adults. I actually have a bigger vision to build entrepreneurship for them, but I want to interview them. I want to ghostwrite their stories and publish a book that will highlight the normalcy and the value of these people that others don't understand. So if I'm going to speak to the straw pig, I would say something like this. I'm so excited. I have this great concept for a book. I'm looking for investors who see the opportunity to be associated with the profile this book could give their business. I'm talking to the pig who built his house from sticks. I would say, I know how connected you are to the community and that you really value every person. I'm looking for a group of people to help sponsor and spread the word about this book concept I have to tell stories of special needs adults. A portion of this proceeds will go to a related charity, and I want to work with a great team who can really build something big together. If I'm speaking to the pig who has built his house from bricks, I would say, I've learned in my journey as a writer and a ghostwriter that story is really the best way to teach. I kind of have this R&D project I'm working on where I want to interview and share stories of special needs adults to bring the world together with a different kind of energy, a bigger picture view. I'm looking for people who resonate with that big picture of this idea. If I was speaking to the wolf, I would say, I've experienced firsthand with raising a special needs child. I want to build a system to help adults with exceptionalities find their way as entrepreneurs. The process I want to develop will start with a book that shares their stories. I'm looking for credible partners to help get this started. So does anybody want to volunteer if one of those stories resonated or one of those approaches resonated with them more than the others? Anybody willing to kind of give a shout out on that?
I like the one about the community and
Okay.
building.
That
Yeah,
doesn't surprise
that
me about
resonated
you.
with me.
You're all about the love, so that's good. That's awesome. So thank you for sharing that. So the interesting thing is you can see that each story or each presentation was basically the same. It had, some had more detail, some had different highlights, but I used a different approach with each of the characters to speak in a way that would best resonate with them, that they would hear easier. So I'm actually a certified coach with a scientifically proven communication system called BANK. And it actually allows you to access communication styles to show you how to use that information to connect with people in a way that they want to be spoken to. So it's quite different than other personality assessments because there are tools that allow you to assess other people, not just yourself. So this is one of the most important aspects of storytelling. If your story cannot connect with your ideal audience, you've just totally lost the value of what that story is. So again, whether it's writing a book or presenting a sales pitch or whatever it may be, if you don't connect with your audience, it's going to fall flat. So BANK is actually an acronym that stands for Blueprint, Action, Nurture, Knowledge. What you actually see on the screen there is my code. Nurture is first, knowledge, then action, then blueprint. So let's just go back and look at those characters again from the story and just see the 4 personality types that I've assigned to them. So here we have the pig who built his house from straw. So I designated him as an action type. He's all about freedom and opportunity and fun, risk, adventure. He likes doing things fast and fun without thinking a lot about it. The next one, who built his house from sticks, is a nurturer. So he's about teamwork, things that are natural, community, authentic. He's very calm and very grounded. The next one, who built his house from brick, is a knowledge type. So he's self-taught, he's self-sufficient, he's a big picture thinker, and he actually wants to be smart and be recognized for that. And then we have the wolf. So he is a blueprint. He's all about procedure, tradition. He's reliable, he's predictable. That's kind of his role in the story. But I also want you to remember that as you saw with my code, everyone is made up of all of these different types of communication styles. So the wolf, for example, might also have been quite ambitious. So he might have a high action type of personality as well. And that's why he was willing to, climb down the chimney to get what he wanted. The pig that built his house from bricks, for example, might also have a really strong nurturing component because he built the house big enough so that he could invite his brothers to come in and be safe and he could look after them. And I also want you to recall back to that picture of Prince Charles and Ozzy Osbourne. I'm going to peg the prince to be a blueprint type, and I'm going to say that Ozzy Osbourne's probably an action. So it's all based on perspective. It's actually kind of fun because with this particular story, I don't know if you've heard of the version of the Three Little Pigs as told by the wolf, but it's quite comical. He blames the whole thing on the fact that he has a cold and he's actually sneezing at their doors. So does anybody have any questions about that communication style, different personalities, anything on that before I move ahead?
Well, I was curious because Steve put here in the comments that he operated as a BKAN and was at alignment, but now he's different.
So Steve, what's your first letter code now?
Well, I think it always was. It just wasn't the way that I operated.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm now the same as you in KAB.
And yeah. Again, I would have guessed that as well. But here's the interesting thing about those codes too, is that they can be situational. So if you were in a job, for example, I'm trying to recall, you mentioned in the last conversation, was it accounting?
I was a corporate accountant.
Yeah. So that's going to require that kind of blueprint side of your brain to engage. So whether it's naturally you or not, that's why it's important to recognize that we are all made up of all four of those codes, because they can kick in at different times. So for example, the third code in most people is the code that you go to in stress. So if you're maybe if your third code is K for knowledge, if somebody is presenting you information and you're stressed about it, you're going to ask all sorts of questions. You're going to maybe immediately start to try to have more intelligence about the situation that they would, anything like that if you're in a uncomfortable situation, right? So thanks for bringing that up out of the chat, Olivia, because I can't see that right now. So if there's anything else that you guys want to throw out that's in the chat, let me know.
That's really interesting that you bring that up about the third letter, because my third letter that is A,
Yeah.
and where I go, and I've gotten much better at it, but still can go there, is that I'll just work my butt off to, get something done. And I'm totally draining every other account that I've got in order to make that happen.
Yeah, I hear you, because I do the same thing. And I also, if I'm in a stressful situation, I'll make like a quick rash decision as well, which is more action type. I don't want to be stressed. So I'm like, I'm going to just make that decision and kind of get that over with, which is more the action personality type as well. So it's quite interesting how these affect us. And, in our family lives, in our business lives, I think one of the most interesting things about the bank community is that it was originally established for sales, but there are a lot of people who have trained as coaches now who use this in marriage counseling and therapy and all sorts of other things, because it actually really helps people communicate. And that's, if the whole world could just communicate a little better, it would be such a better place, right? So
yes, it would.
That's awesome. Thanks for your input on that. So we have reviewed the value of your story and how to connect with your client's story. We've talked about effective communication. And so now I'm going to kind of go back to that, the handout, and we're going to jump back to how to tell a story. And then we're going to actually build some business stories to give you guys some examples. So I want to ask you, first of all, when you think of storytelling, do you actually think about business? Or do you think of children's stories or folklore or fairy tales, or maybe an old man sitting on the front porch recalling, his glory days when things were simpler and he had to walk, 20 miles uphill in a snowstorm to go to school? Is that what you think of when you think of stories? Or do you think of something that's made up? Or do you think of something that's exaggerated when you hear the word story? Maybe you think of a hilarious adventure shared by a friend over a drink. I know I've done that many times, and splitting my sides with laughter as I'm recalling those stories. But here's the interesting thing. These stories all have something in common, and that's the same thing that you can actually use with storytelling in your business. So storytelling brings this authentic, personal approach to your marketing that doesn't really feel like marketing. So if you're one of those like me who doesn't really like pushing sales, if you don't want to play in that field, storytelling is actually for you. In this online world that we're in now, it also really helps to replace that smile and a handshake that you used to be able to offer at an in-person meeting. It really creates a human connection and it generates empathy. I think this is an interesting process. If you haven't tried this, dictate a voice text into your phone and then read it back and realize how differently you speak than how you write. So writing tends to be a little more flat. It's hard to pause. It's hard to add different intonations to your voice. It's hard to add body language, of course, with my hand waving around here. We can't see that when we do something on text, and it's easy to see why people can get lost with the text on a page. But I'm going to challenge you. Speaking of pages, my page is just stuck together. There we go. What if you could actually add some of that dynamic back into your written words? What if your website, your biography, your social media pages could project who you really are and connect with emotion? Olivia talked last night about actually using those kinds of things on LinkedIn, how to be vulnerable, how to teach people, how to connect with people, rather than just putting up your biography and it looks like a resume. There's so much more you can do. And you can really do that by enhancing that with the power of story. So it's easy when you understand the formula. So all stories, whether it is a major motion picture, it's a novel, or it's sales copy, and let's remember that everything that you write is sales copy. When it's done well, it follows a pattern that involves a hero, a call to action, a guide, and success. People don't buy your product. They buy the feeling that you leave them with. They buy the problem that you help them solve. They buy the confidence you give them. They buy the shared journey that you take together. Stories give people a look at the person behind the business because clients really do buy you. Relationships, to me, are the new sales strategy. They buy how you can serve them and who you can guide them to become. So if we look at a big business like Apple or Nike, they have the budget for these marketing campaigns to sell you a feeling. Nike makes you feel like you're capable. They make you feel like you care about your health and your fitness, and you're going to dedicate the time to just do it. Apple makes you feel like they understand your frustrations. They don't get viruses. They make functionality easier. And you're in a separate class somehow when you use a MacBook or an Apple phone. Steve Jobs lived by this quote: "The most powerful person in the world is a storyteller." Stories really connect on emotion. And if you remember from earlier, you buy based on that emotion. So let's have a look at basic storytelling. The discussion of the hero. Have you heard of the hero's journey? Steve, I think if you're heavily involved with writing, you would be familiar with this. This formulation of storytelling was hypothesized by a guy named Joseph Campbell back almost a century ago. It looks complicated, but for marketing, it's much simpler. I mentioned earlier, the basics are hero, quest, guide, and triumph. This gets a lot more complicated when you're writing a novel. There's a lot more depth to it. But how does this relate? We see this in almost every book or movie from every genre. It certainly makes sense to have a hero. If you have a hero movie, a war movie or a superhero movie, but everything, action, romance, fairy tale, comedy, rom-com, doesn't matter. they all have this selling format that involves a hero. So how does that relate to business stories? So I love this quote by Steve Maraboli: if you are not the hero of your own story, then you're missing the whole point of your humanity. Many entrepreneurs make the mistake of trying to be the hero for their client. The hero's journey isn't just about movies. We all want to live our own lives as our own hero. That's a quest that we all have. So your role with your marketing copy is to write to be the guide that the hero needs to get them to their triumph or to their success. So look at the Lord of the Rings series. Gandalf seemed like a pretty powerful hero type. He even gave up his life at one point in the story, but he knew that his role wasn't the hero. I had to laugh because I saw this funny meme when I was searching for this picture, and the photo had this caption that said, "Why didn't Gandalf just use some of his magic to send that damn ring into the pit of doom?" His role in the story was to guide Frodo to his destiny. Frodo was the hero in the end. And that's how you want your client to feel, standing on that lava-filled mountain with that gold ring in their hand. Your story needs to speak to the pain points your client has and show them the ways to overcome them. Your story needs to evoke trust and competence, and then they'll depend on you as that guide. And that's what attracts that perfect client. They relate to your story because it's actually part of their story. They realize they need you to make their story complete. But you don't have to be a screenwriter or a novelist. You just actually have to know some basic steps. So I'm going to close off with some samples, and I hope this is helpful. There are some typical samples that you can use in a business to share as a story that are pretty simple and pretty easy for anybody to do when you're just getting started with this process. So we know how to step into our client's story and make them the hero. But I'm going to just give you some practical examples to help you start your library. So I'm going to share some of my stories, and then I'm going to make up some stories for the example of this mechanic who's running his own garage. So let's start with sharing client success stories. That's an easy one to talk about. That illustrates competence. It helps you show your expertise. So a story for me might be something like this. One of my favorite story biography interviews was with Heather, who was struggling defining the variety of services that she offered in her business. As we worked through her values, her themes, and her goals, the line between all these various services appeared. They were all connected through this bigger vision. Her business pivoted, and she's now focused on that big picture that we uncovered together. The mechanic would say something like this. Joe came into my shop with a terrible engine knock in his brand new BMW. A quick assessment, and I discovered it had regular gas in the tank, but it was a diesel engine. I flushed it out, I added some compound for repair, and he was on his way home to question his son about his use of the car the day before. He was wise to come to me so quickly because his engine would have been ruined in a short time. So you can see that through both of these examples, although we did the work that shows our expertise, the stories have been shared to actually highlight the client to be the hero. The father was smart to come to the shop because he saved himself from a bigger complication. So another example of a story that we can share is sharing our failures. And that one can be a little trickier, but this again helps you be relatable because it shares your vulnerability. So I could say something like this. I decided that my business was going to be as a professional blogger. I didn't get a lot of business at first. I love writing blogs. I'm a lifelong learner, so it's not hard work for me to write a blog for a business like an automated machine tool shop because I get to learn about it. But I didn't have my story right. I needed to connect with people where they're at and guide them to the value of having a blog. That started with knowing their story. The mechanic might say something like this. When I first started out, my first job was in a shop where the owner was elderly. Seemed like he was pretty close to retirement. I thought it might be an easy way to have my own garage by showing him how fast and knowledgeable I was, and I could buy him out. I could run circles around this guy and thought my first review would come in with flying colors. He sat me down and told me that his clients felt rushed and that I was impersonal. His clients many of whom were also older and had supported his business for decades, enjoyed the banter, the updates on family, and a hot cup of coffee. That taught me that business is about so much more than competence. My hot coffee and my family-friendly waiting room today attest to that lesson that I learned. And then I'm going to give you one more example, and this is turning an inspiring quote into a story. This is a really easy one to do on social media if you're looking for content. So I could take a quote like something like this: "Be the change you want to see in the world," which is one of my favorite quotes. I could, post a picture with that saying on it, and then I could have some content that sounds something like this. That's what I decided to focus on with my blog. In a world where profit seems to battle sustainability, I wanted to find a gentler approach: harmony. There's a way to meet people where they're at in their journey and inspire those small steps to change. And the mechanic could tell a story something like this. He could take the quote, "If you can't stop thinking about it, never start working for it." Again, he could put that on a picture of a car or something, and he could tell a little story something like this. "I dreamed of owning my own garage when I was 6 years old and propped up my little Tykes plastic car on some bricks in my dad's garage and had a look under the hood. It took me a long time to learn what was really under the hood of a car, but I held wrenches and I watched intently when my dad and my grandpa worked on their cars as a boy. Through my teen years, I purposely bought different makes of old cars to fix up so I could learn about all of them. I continue to learn about new features now, like electric vehicles, so I can provide the best service for you." So these are just a few of the ways that storytelling can be used, but I do encourage you to start with your own story. Knowing who you are really allows clients to step into your story and share part of their story with you. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. And I'm not sure if, there we go, Olivia has posted all that info in there. So I just want to ask if you want to find out anything more about communication intelligence or storytelling. I have some upcoming events next week and some other workshops in August. Please reach out and I'd be happy to connect with you on that. My contact information is there in the chat. And then I want to just ask you guys if you have any questions about storytelling, anything more that I can help you with. Jewel, I love your participation.
See.
And she's an animal lover. Did you see the kitty?
Yeah,
Yes.
3 so far. You've met 2 of them, believe it or not. They've gone across the screen and they're up to mischief. So if you see another tail in front of my face, please don't be put off.
Okay, you've got your cats. I've got my dogs. They were barking at the beginning of my presentation, so.
They're all beautiful.
Yes.
I had a couple of questions earlier on. When I did my degree work, I went into the Belbin team roles, if you're familiar with that. I don't know if you are.
No.
But it teaches you about different elements of what you can utilize in a team and how you particularly work within a team.
Okay.
And we also did a self-development module, which I was probably the only person in 30 who was actually even remotely interested in the content. But I found it fascinating. But it brought up a lot of different things. So the questions for you are, how would you be applying this technique to other people? In case I've missed it in what I understand what you've been saying, by the way, but it may not be quite right, the question. And with the Belbin team roles, for example, I actually trained myself to develop the other elements that I felt I was weaker on. So speaking to that, is that something that your bank code can do? And the final one is about how I learned that my self-perception and the perception of others of me were different. My support tutor that I had at that time actually told me that my perception of myself had yet to catch up with my reality.
Or maybe not. Maybe you're making your own reality.
I thought it was rather kind of her, because my opinion of myself was much lower than everybody else's. So, I took that with appreciation. But it's again that sort of thing with what you're talking about with your own personal interpretation of self and how others perceive you. So
Yeah.
It's
So
like
great questions.
all
I'll
linked
start
together.
with your, kind of your original question, which was how to apply that kind of technique that you learned in that team roles and the self-development. So bank is probably somewhat similar in that it's. I actually love how you transition through all of the answers that I'm going to give you. That when you start to understand, first of all, your own values and the way that you communicate and that you see the world, the best thing that you can do is actually start to elevate the levels where you're lacking, which is what you said you did, Jewel, just naturally. Because if you can actually raise your intelligences of all of those levels, so in bank we talk about blueprint, action, nurture, knowledge. I'm sure they had different things that they used in the Belvin model, but if you can raise your intelligence level in all of those, and you want to live from a place of serving and understanding, you're going to be able to have communication. For example, my last code is blueprint. I'm very not systems oriented. It drives me around the bend to have to do my accounting and my taxes and all those things. But to learn how to do that better, or to appreciate the value of that, is going to allow me to have a conversation with someone else who does appreciate systems and predictability and things like that. So it just elevates me, it elevates the frequency of the planet when we can all be communicating better. So I love that you've actually talked about developing those other elements. So again, that is something in bank when you do take the coaching. Part of that is working on raising up the level of all of those intelligences in yourself to be able to deal more effectively with people with other personalities that are different from yours. And then the self-perception model, that's an interesting one. Like, I don't know that came up so much in my training in the way that you have described it, but I certainly would say that, we had this conversation earlier, and so I'm just going to go back to this as an example, that if you kind of do your code, somebody walks up to you at a meeting where maybe you're not very social and you're feeling a bit stressed, and there's an app you can have on your phone, or you can pass somebody these, sorry, that's my dogs again. You can pass somebody these color-coded cards and they can just look at them and say, oh, this is what order I would put them in. If you're at a meeting and you're in a situation where you feel tense because that's not naturally where you want to be, your codes are going to be different than if you're at home and you're comfortable and you're relaxed and you're kind of a little bit more thoughtful about the process. So depending on where you are, whether it's workplace, whether it's social, whether it's with family, you can definitely appear differently to different people. So I hope that helps to answer your question to some degree. If there's anything more that I can dig into on that for you, I'm happy to do that.
It does speak to the interactions that you have with different people external to yourself. The questionnaires that I gave to the people during that particular incident went through the various different personal relationships and the various different work relationships, as well as medical relationships. I basically traumatized everybody I knew with these blasted questionnaires, and they all came back. And there were a lot of consistencies in it from them. There were a few quirky differences which would have been linked to the environmental aspects that you're referring to.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, they were the same. The difference was in my own opinion of self,
right,
and their perception of me. I've improved in keeping, I might add, since then, or at least I'm claiming that right now. But that was the bit that I was really getting at, is
yes,
that difference.
Yeah. So again, that's not something that was addressed specifically in my bank training. But I will offer that I feel, especially from what you said, that others saw value in you that you didn't see in yourself. I feel that that's a bit of a personal development journey, right? I think,
Oh, yeah.
We're our worst critics for sure. And if others, saw value in your workplace as being a leader, for example, and you were like, oh my goodness, like I don't feel like I could step up to that. I feel like I'm out of my element. But if you consistently, showed up and did the things that you're supposed to do and helped to build the business, others would see you that way, whether you recognized it in yourself or not. And so I feel like that might be more to character traits than actual personality, if that kind of is helpful, right? Like maybe actions or perceived tendencies, as opposed to kind of who you are at your core when you're communicating with people. Do you communicate from a standpoint of nurturing? Do you communicate from a standpoint of efficiency, blueprint? Like that's kind of where Bank is at. So I hope that's helpful.
Right. I follow the differences there. So thank you for taking the time to answer, and I'll now be quiet.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question about any of the things about storytelling or communication?
Maureen does.
Yes, please go ahead, Maureen.
Hi, Helen. I'm definitely signing up for one of your workshops next week.
Awesome.
What I'm going to ask is what I want. Is it what I'm looking for? So, and you've shared a lot, and I love it, in storytelling, and you give me that whole perspective on storytelling and being vulnerable. I've done that, and through my storytelling, through my blogs that I've written, what I've said on my website, I have this most amazing client who came to me generically because of my story.
Excellent. Love to hear that.
So now I'm thinking, can I have someone review my LinkedIn profile? Maybe that's Olivia. Is my story accurate? Does it connect to my audience? This is what I'm wondering. And am I expecting too much too fast? I mean, I want more of, and she's not the only one anyway, that's what I want more of. People coming to me generically because of, and I love what you say, my story.
Yeah.
So that they can see themselves in my story.
For sure. And I think, just to kind of add a little bit of, let's say, business reality, is that you are still going to have to go and find clients, whether it's networking through LinkedIn or networking online or whatever it is. There always has to be an effort on your part to start those relationships.
I do that. I do all of that.
But having your story on LinkedIn, having your story on your website, even having your story as part of how you introduce yourself in a 30-second pitch or a 1-minute, presentation when you're in a group, having a story there, having words that are going to connect with the people that you want to connect with, that is really going to help to make that kind of organic connection that you're looking for as well. So I would definitely say that's something to look into for your LinkedIn profile. Olivia can help you with that. Your website, whatever that may be.
I've done that on my LinkedIn. I've done that on my website. I do that. I guess my question is my story resonating, and how am I going to determine that? Would you be able to help me with that?
Yes, for sure. Because again, it might just be the matter of switching some words that are going to land with people that you want to hear your story, right?
Perfect. So what I'm going to sign up for next week, will that be what I'm looking for? Or do I need to look at something different here?
Yeah, I would say that you're going to get a little bit more in depth of what we talked about today. Mm-hmm. I think if you're looking for something specific to help you with wording, that's where you might want to book a half-hour call with me and see if we can actually work on something privately. That might be better for what you're looking for.
Yes. Okay. All right. That's what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Maureen. Okay. Steve, I love that comment. When your story comes from a heart place, it's so much more fun and profitable. That's for sure, because you're not making anything up. You're just being you, and whoever it's going to fall on is who is meant to fall on. It makes everything so much more fun, for sure. So I think I am all finished. I don't know if you have some extra songs to play between now and 3 o'clock, Olivia, but
Always.
Olivia always has songs.
Always
That's awesome.
have a song. Thank you so much, Helen, just for providing a different perspective. I mean, all of our presenters, I think there's a really nice alignment, or like this thread that I hope you as an attendee are beginning to see. You've been watching along, that it's okay to want to share our message, our stories, and then also be profitable, right? That's what Sue talked about. That's what the other Helen Chang had talked about with the ROI. And I like how you preface that too. Like it's we if we're not comfortable being that pushy sales, this is a great way just to have marketing and to level up that maybe love and trust factor through the story.
And I think it's a tricky one. Sorry, go ahead.
And I was thinking what Mila was saying, just give out samples, right? Because they may pass it on to someone else, et cetera, et cetera. And that becomes like that business card that you're talking about, that it replaces that business card. It's a giant business card.
Yes. Yeah. And all I was going to add to that is that, the unfortunate plight of all of us entrepreneurs is we do have to make money. So you need to figure out a way that is comfortable for you to do that. And for some people, especially more of a nurturing, caring type, storytelling is a way easier way to do that, because you don't feel like you're that kind of aggressive, pushy salesperson that we all shut down when we see them coming, right? So it's a way to help do the things in your business that you need to do, but do it a little bit more softly and a little bit more naturally. So,
well, it transforms a relationship from something that you're trying to get somebody else to do to something that you're sharing. I mean, you come from a place of generosity rather than from a place of greed or from, I've got to have this happen or whatever. When I left corporate, my mission literally was to figure out how to make money and enjoy every single aspect of the process. And, coming from I love story anyway, and I always have. And, coming from a place where I'm sharing with other people what I'm doing and sharing who I am with other people. And Maureen, to go to your point about, how do you make sure that you're resonating, is that happens on both sides, is that the you resonate with them and they resonate with you. And when those stories, that vibration is harmonious, it's so much easier. Everything is so much easier.
Yes, definitely. And I love that was your quest from the beginning, Steve, is to do something that made you money and actually brought you joy at the same time, because there's a lot of miserable entrepreneurs out there who haven't figured that out.
Well, yeah, I was also incredibly suicidal, so it was kind of
a must do. Yeah. I think I want to just kind of end, to the point that when you're building relationships in business, and I think I've got two of my fellow Eagles on here, Olivia and Nancy, that, when you're building relationships authentically, it isn't always about sales. Sometimes it's just about a referral. Sometimes it's about helping someone else. Sometimes it's just about having another personal contact out there, another friend in the world. So it all has to kind of be part and parcel of your business approach. We can all see those slimy salespeople coming a mile away because they don't care anything about you. They just have an agenda. And so again, that having story and having a way to connect with people just really helps to kind of break that tension and just diffuse the whole idea that we have to sell all the time, because we don't.
That's a fantastic way to wrap up that message. So thank you, Helen. Thank you. And I did drop in Helen's free gift for all of you. And what better place to begin your story than your bio? So for all of you entrepreneurs and business owners out there, a bio is just a must-have. And really download that template that Helen has for you. It's the your story bio template, and get in touch with her. So fantastic. Unmute yourselves, please, and just give her a roaring round of applause.
Thank you. I will receive all of that. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Helen.